Hello, this is my geodesic dome episode. I built a geodesic dome in my backyard, and the first half of this episode I'm going to tell you how I built it and mistakes I made, lessons I learned, things I would do differently. And in the second half of the episode, I'm going to tell you about the next dome that I would like to build, bigger than this one. So let's start with the one in the backyard. First I went on YouTube and did some research, found a dome calculator where they give you the dimensions of the struts. The type of dome I built is made out of steel conduit. It's called half-inch conduit, but the half-inch is the inside diameter. It means that you can put a half-inch cable through this conduit. Conduit is steel tubing. Let me show you. This is half-inch steel conduit. As you can see, it's squished on the ends and then a hole's drilled in it. And then the dome that I built is called a 4V frequency 20-foot diameter dome. It has 6 different sizes of struts, and you squish the ends, or you cut the struts to length, and then you squish the ends, and then you bolt them together like this. The first thing I had to do in my research is to come up with a plan. I figured out that the plan wasn't going to fit on a standard sized piece of paper, so I bought this big pad, and see, this is the plan of the dome. Up here, well, up here is the different sizes of the struts and how many you need. The dimensions of the struts are from hole to hole, so you actually have to cut them an inch longer than that, because the holes are half an inch from the end on each end. Okay, But in order to build this, you have a choice of building it either from the bottom up or from the top down. The top down method, you build the first vertex and bolt it together, and then you bolt more struts to that to make the next level, and each level you build this on the ground. You start with the top, and each level you put up on sawhorses. So you have 2 or 3 sawhorses, and so but the number of struts that this dome has, a 4V frequency is the number of struts. So a 1V just has a few struts, and then a 2V frequency has more, and 3V has more, and 4V has even more. This one has got about 500 struts, maybe, or was it 300? It was somewhere around there. Anyway, a lot. The struts come in 6 different sizes for a 4V frequency. Different frequencies have different numbers and types of struts. So the conduit, well, comes in 10-foot lengths, and then you cut the struts to length, squish the ends, drill the holes in them, and then bolt them together, and that's the dome. Let me show you a picture of what the dome looks like here. There. That's what the dome looks like in my backyard. So the longest strut is 40 inches, and the shortest strut is 30 something. So they're all about 3 feet. So out of a 10-foot pole, I can get 3 struts. And that's why I picked that dimension, so that it would be efficient. If the struts were longer than 40 inches, I wouldn't be able to get 3 of them out of a 10-foot pole. And so then I'd have a lot of waste. Okay. So you bolt it all together, and then throw this plastic drop cloth over it, and clamp it on with clamps, and that keeps the rain off. The reason I built the dome is as a workspace to dry lumber for the type of furniture that I want to make. Okay. I don't know if you can see it in this picture or not. Not too well, but I built the dome right on the ground. I didn't I didn't build a foundation or a base. I was trying to keep costs down, and the base would have been very expensive. When I started building this, it was before the pandemic and before the supply chain issues, and the 10-foot poles were $4 a piece. By the time I finished it, like 6 months later, the poles had increased in price to $8 a piece. So I bought them in batches of 10 poles, and by the time I bought the last batch, it was a lot more expensive. So I've got about $500 in this project. I set it on the ground. I set it on blocks. Let me show you this block here. Yeah. I put a pole in the middle and then measured out 10 feet in radius from the pole and put blocks all the way around, and I dug down a little bit, like, I think the blocks are 9 inches high, I don't know. I dug down about halfway, half a block down, and put it in the ground so that it wouldn't move and so that the dome would be close to the ground. So if I was doing this for a house or some other kind of a more permanent structure, I would have built a wooden foundation, but my phone's ringing. Doggone it. Why does that happen whenever I start recording? They're just going to have to wait because I want to finish this. Okay, so but I decided to build it from the bottom up rather than the top down, because with all the struts, the dome weighs over 300 pounds. And what you do is you build a level. Like if you're doing it from the top down, you build the top of it, bolt it together, and you put it on sawhorses, and then each level that you add to the bottom of it, you have to lift it up on the sawhorses to the next level, and 300 pounds is too much for me to lift up, so I decided to build it from the bottom up instead of the top down. So you just lay all the struts on the ground in a circle and start bolting them together. And I have other pictures here that show here. So that it wasn't quite finished yet. I still had the top I needed to finish when I took this picture. but it was up, like, see, 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. I think there's like 6 levels altogether. And the struts themselves, this is what the struts look like when I was building the dome. I was putting it together, and these are the different piles. So each pile is a different size. There's the A struts, the B struts, the C struts, D, E, and F. 6 different lengths. So each of these stacks is a different letter. I bolted them together with bolts and washers and nuts. This is the bolt, the type of bolts that I made it with originally, and this is an alloy steel, black oxide coated bolt, and it's a high density steel, so it's very strong. But the black anodized coating on it did not resist the corrosion of being outside, so it got rusty. And I picked this type of, it's called a socket head cap screw, because you put a 6-sided Allen wrench in the head of this, and you probably can't see that. No, it's just shadow. And when the rust got in there, it made it so that you couldn't get the Allen wrench in. So even though this is high density, very strong steel, the rust would only have stayed on the surface. It wouldn't have penetrated deep into the bolt. The bolt still would have been strong, but it would have been difficult to get the Allen wrench into the head to loosen it. So I replaced all of the bolts after they rusted with stainless steel hex head bolts, because even if these got rusty, which they won't because they're stainless steel, the hex shape would still be accessible with a wrench, even if it had a little coating of rust on it. So that made it so that I could make changes to the dome if I needed to. Okay. Some of the mistakes I made. Well, the first mistake was that I used the socket head cap screw instead of a hex head, because you get a little bit of rust in that hole, and then you can't get the Allen wrench in. So I replaced all the bolts with the stainless steel bolts, which won't rust and which have hex heads, which are easier to access with a wrench. Let's see what else. When I was building the dome, you need to have plans for each layer. You build it one layer at a time. So I redrew the plans. In a layer format. So each the bottom layer there, you know, it shows the bottom layer are D's, D struts, delta struts, and then each letter shows what size the strut is, and then the layers show what order they go together in. And then, but when I was building it, I got to certain points where I couldn't get the struts to come together at the vertexes. And the problem is that even though I was trying to be as careful as I could, it's difficult to make sure you have the right strut in the right place everywhere. And if you don't have the right strut in the right place, it won't go together. So after I had the dome half built, I was up at about the 4th or 5th level. It was getting difficult to get the vertexes to come together. So I went and measured all of the struts that I'd already put on and marked them with little pieces of colored tape, so that each strut had a little piece of colored tape on it showing which strut it was, and then I could look at the dome and I could look at the plans and see where the mistakes were. So once I got the mistakes fixed, I took the struts, unbolted the struts that were in the wrong place, and bolted the right struts on. It all went together just fine. Okay. So I should have marked all of the struts before I started, but I didn't until about halfway through. So that was mistake number 2. Mistake number 1 was the wrong bolts. Mistake number 2 was not identifying all of the struts, so you could tell by looking at it which one it was. You know, whether it was a 40-inch strut or a 38-inch strut or a 36-inch strut or a 30-inch strut. By color coding them, I was able to make sure that I had all the right struts in all the right places. Okay. And I made all the struts out of 10-foot poles. So I would take a 10-foot pole and take a tape measure and a grease marker, which is like a pencil, but it's made from grease instead of pencil lead, and it marks on metal poles pretty good. So take a tape measure and measure off the length of the strut, put a little grease mark on it, and then use a hacksaw to cut it. So I cut over 300 struts with a hacksaw, which was another mistake. I should have bought a metal chop saw and made it that way. It would have been a lot quicker, a lot easier, more accurate, because it's pretty hard to cut this stuff with a hacksaw. Now, after you have the length of the strut cut, the next step is to squish the end. Okay, I squished the end of it. I guess the first one I did, I tried to do in a vise. I have a big vise, but that was too much trouble. So I bought a lever press. A lever press is a workbench tool that is bolted to your workbench, and it has a big lever on it that you pull down, and that pushes a steel rod down onto whatever you're trying to press and squishes it. Let me show you a picture of a lever press here. There. Not a very good picture, but over here where this orange part is a 3-foot piece of pipe that I put on the handle, because this was a 1-ton lever press. They come in 1/2 ton, 1 ton, 2 ton, 3 ton. I bought a 1-ton lever press. I should have bought a 2-ton because this was not strong enough. And then down here where the ram is, the strut would go right down here, and there's a stop back. I built a little fixture for it so that when I pushed it in there, it would always stop at the same place, and I would squish all of the ends exactly the same, so they'd all be the same length of the squish. And then after you squish the ends, you need to drill the hole. I was using 1/4 bolts, so I drilled a 1/4-inch hole using a drill press. This is my drill press. It's a small bench top drill press. I probably should have bought a bigger one because this one was barely strong enough to do it. I also built a little fixture here out of oak where you slide the strut in here after it's been squished. you slide the squished strut in here up against the stop at the end of the fixture, and then pull the lever down on the side, and you turn the switch on and the drill comes on, and you pull the lever down and the drill comes down, and it drills it in the same place every time. So the fixture keeps the hole centered in the width, and it keeps it 1/2 inch from the end. So all of the holes were centered and 1/2 inch from the end on all of the struts. Okay. So that's the dome that I built. It took me over 6 months to do it because I was just working in my spare time, like an hour after work in the evenings, or a couple hours on the weekends. It took me a long time to finish it, but I would like to make a bigger dome. This one is 20 foot in diameter, but I would like to make one that is 5 times that size, 100 foot in diameter and 50 feet tall in the center. The dome I built was 20 foot in diameter, and it's about 13 feet tall in the center, because it's not just a where is my picture? Okay, here it is. Yeah, it's not just a semicircle, okay? This bottom row of struts are all D struts, A, B, C, D, E, F. The bottom row is all D's. So I made an extra, and on the bottom row, it takes 20 struts to make the hemisphere. So I made 20 more D's and put them on the ground, and then I made these struts here. They zigzag back and forth between the two bottom rows. So this bottom row is bottom row on the plan, and those are D's. But I added to the plan, let's see, yeah, I added another row to the bottom to make it a little bit taller. So right here at this level is the bottom level of the plan. So I duplicated this bottom row of D's on the ground, and then I connected them together with these, which were just like 40 inches. So at an angle, it's about 3 feet that I added to the height, because I didn't want the curvature near the wall making the floor space of the dome unusable. So there's a straight cylinder on the bottom of this. This bottom level is a straight cylinder because these are all D's, and then on the ground they're all D's. Okay, and then these are all just zigzag between them, so that I have a straight cylinder on the bottom, and then from here up, this is the hemisphere, half of a sphere. Okay, so this is where the curvature starts. But down here, there's no curvature, this is just straight. So instead of being 20-foot diameter, 10-foot tall, it's 20-foot diameter, 13-foot tall. And of course you need a ladder or two in order to get these upper layers bolted together. So that's the dome that I built, and I think that if I was doing it over again, the things I would do differently is I would start with stainless steel screws instead of alloy steel, and I would mark all of the struts, color coded them before I started. And also, you can't just set the dome on the ground and put plastic over it and then not have it blow away. So I bought 6 screw anchors, 3-foot long screw anchors that screw into the dirt and then attach to the bottom row of struts on the dome so that there's no way it can blow away. So it is well attached to the ground. But this dome was just a practice run to see if I could build a dome, how hard it would be, learning experience to see what lessons I would learn while I was doing it for the next dome that I want to build. The next dome I want to build, I want to be much larger and the purpose to be different. My plan is to buy a piece of acreage out in the desert in the United States Southwest, maybe Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, somewhere around there, to buy cheap acreage in the desert and to put a dome large enough, 100-foot in diameter, 50-foot tall, that I can grow trees in it and have aquaponic farms to produce all the food that I'm going to need, and living structure, because the dome in the backyard I don't live in, I just use it to dry wood. So all it has to do is keep the rain off, let the sun shine through, and let the air flow through so that the wood will dry. I have oak trees in the backyard that I'm cutting down and drying the wood in the dome to make into furniture. But the big dome that I want to make, I want to have a place to live in it and grow all of my food in it and stuff like that. And then outside the dome, I want to have solar panels to produce electricity, and the dome itself will be a rain catchment system. When the rain falls on the dome, it will sluice off to the edges and go into an underground cistern to store the water for the rest of the year. So the dome needs to be waterproof, and it also needs to be moisture proof so that I don't lose a lot of moisture from inside the dome to the desert outside. That way I can recycle the water and it won't take as much water. So if I'm recycling all the water in the dome, you don't have to add that much each year. Okay, so the big dome I want to build, I don't think that I can use struts like this. Okay? Because attaching the plastic to it is too difficult. But instead of using round steel tubing, if I used a T-shaped steel channel, which is, so steel channel comes in different shapes. There's the I-beam channel, which is the cross-section looks like an I. There is T-channel, where the cross-section looks like a T, and then there's angle iron, where the cross-section looks like an L, you know, like that. But in T-channel, the cross-section looks like this, and I would probably need 1 inch or 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch T-channel, and because the dome is larger, either the frequency is going to have to go up or the struts are going to have to be a lot longer. And I think an 8V frequency would keep the strut length at reasonable lengths. So I would buy either galvanized, or I would galvanize it myself, T-channel, and cut the ends of it so that the flat part of the T, see, a T-channel has a flat base and then it has a center rib. If I cut the rib out at the ends, that leaves a flat area that I can drill a hole into for bolting to a hub And rather than bolting them all together the way you do with electrical metal conduit, with T-channel, you would buy flat stock that is like 4-inch wide by 1/4 of an inch thick flat steel, and cut it into squares, 4-inch by 4-inch square, and then cut the corners off and drill holes in it, and then you would bolt each strut to one of the holes in the hub. The hub would have 6 holes in it for the 6 strut intersections and 5 holes for the 5 strut intersections. So they would get bolted on there, and then the center channel of the extrusion would be facing out, and the flat part of the extrusion would be on the inside of the dome. And when you bolted these together in triangles, that would make a triangular frame that you could drop flat stock into, like flat plexiglass or flat glass or flat plywood, into this frame to make it waterproof. If you were using glass or plexiglass, you could take like silicone caulk and run a bead all around the inside of this triangular frame, and then stick your triangular shaped flat piece of plexiglass in there, and it would stick to the frame by the silicone, and that way it would be really easy to skin the dome in a rigid flat triangles. But the problem with doing that is that you have to, each strut, you have to bend the back a little bit. So you see how this strut is bent on the ends? That's so that it can form a circle. If they were straight, it wouldn't go together right. And the way you calculate that angle is very simple. That bend angle is really easy to calculate. Like if you have 20 struts, like say the D struts. The D struts, it takes 20 of those to go around the circumference. And so you take 360 degrees and divide it by 20, and that is 18 degrees per strut. But you divide that by 2 because each strut has 2 ends. So this one is bent at 9 degrees and this one's bent at 9 degrees. And that way 20 of them together can make a circle. So all you have to do is take the length of your strut and divide that into the circumference of your dome, and so like shorter struts have shallower angles. The on the 4V frequency dome, some of the struts are 9 degrees, some are 8 degrees, and some are 7 degrees. But that's not that much difference. So for these, I just put the strut into a vise and bent it over a little bit until I had 8 degrees, and it all worked out. But because of that angle, the back of the T channel has to bend. Like instead of the back of the T channel being flat, it has to bend a little bit like this, so that when you put your flat panel in there, it's not sitting up on a corner. It's going into a flat surface. So I would need to build a strut bender that could bend the back of the T-channels at, you know, the proper angle. And that wouldn't be that hard to do. So that is my plan for when I retire, is to buy a large acreage, at least 10 acres, preferably more, out in the desert, wherever the cheapest I can get it, and build a 100-foot dome, which is big enough for me to have an aquaponic farm inside of it, and living quarters and workshops and everything else that I might need, and to have an underground cistern for water catchment, because even in the desert it does have a rainy season, and you can catch a lot of water and store it underground for the rest of the year. And solar panels that are mounted on the ground, or on frames that are on the ground outside of the dome, to supply all the electricity that you need, and thereby be self-sufficient. So that's it for this recording. If you have any comments on any of this stuff, let me know. As far as my eye goes, this one still hurts a little bit, but it's getting better. As you can see, it's a little better today than it was in the last video. But I'll see you next time. Maybe next time the subject will be the aquaponic farms, or the diet for optimum health.